All right, don't mind the dust. I know it's dusty. I'll clean it out this time. This thing lives behind my TV. I typically don't really see it. This is my home theater PC. It spends most of its life, playing back Netflix, YouTube, Amazon Prime Video, Disney Plus, Blu-ray rips that I've downloaded. Cough, cough, cough. And so it really doesn't need to be that much power. This is what's in there. This is a Ryzen 3 2200G, one of the first from the Ryzen series in their APUs with the Vega graphics built in. But this is a 4-core processor, no SMT or whatever AMD calls it. I just call it hyperthreading. I know that's an Intel trademark term, but everybody knows what hyperthreading is. This one doesn't have it. It's 4 cores, 4 threads. But honestly, for what it needs to do, it does the job. Like I said, this plays back 4K Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Disney Plus. No problem, really, because the graphics in there are decent enough, and it can handle it. So it does 4K, 60 hertz on my TV, and so I really don't need more power for this thing. But this is what I got. This is the Ryzen 5 5600G. So this is a 6-core, 12-thread, again with Radeon Vega graphics, although they stopped advertising it as Vega, because honestly, by this point, RDNA was well out. In fact, RDNA 2 was probably out or close to being out. And so I guess maybe they didn't want to advertise that anymore. So yeah, this one's 4 cores up to 3.7 gigahertz. And this one's 6 cores, 12 threads, up to 4.4 gigahertz. So it's a much faster CPU. But as far as the graphics go, again, it's still Vega. It's actually not that much faster, which is kind of disappointing, because, this is I think it's Zen Plus, but, it's a 2000 series Ryzen processor. And this is a 5000 series, so there's, several generations in between these. And again, as a CPU goes, this is much, much faster. But as far as just the graphics go, it's really only slightly faster. And, I mean, that's great if you need more CPU power. But again, for this home theater PC that spends most of its life just playing back video, I don't need more than 4 cores. I really don't. And so I feel kind of weird about this. The thing is, the pricing right now is insane. AMD just came out with the 7000 series, which is Zen 4. And so all their Zen 3 based processors, all the 5000 series processors, have just been ridiculous. They went on a Thanksgiving sale, and this guy was $139.99 Canadian. The 5700X was $189.99 Canadian, and the 5800G, which by the way is what's in there, my main gaming slash video editing PC. That's the 5800X. Sorry if I said 5800G. I didn't mean to say that. 5800X. The 5800X was on sale for $299, which is insane. The chip was $620 Canadian. We're talking Canadian here, remember. The 5800X was $620 Canadian when it launched. I paid $600 for it. I bought it a little bit after launch, but fairly close to when it came out, if I recall, anyways. But yeah, I paid like $600 for that 5800X. And at the time, it was one of the fastest gaming processors out there. Still up there, actually. I mean, yeah, the 12th gen Intel beats it by a little bit, but they're still really fast processors. But yeah, so now that's like $299, I think. It might have been $289. They all had a $10 coupon, so like this was $149, but then when you added it to your cart, it took off an additional $10. So it ended up being $139. The 5700X was $199, but then the $10 coupon brought it down to $189. That one was really the star of the show. The 5700X came out after the 5800X, quite a bit after, as kind of a slightly cheaper option, but you know, it was almost just as fast. It was 8 cores, 16 threads, the same as my 5800X. And it was just really slightly slower in the clock speeds. I mean, in theory, you could probably overclock a 5700X and get it to the same speed as a 5800X. But yeah, to see that on sale for $189 is insane. Like, absolutely insane. And so AMD just came out with their 7000 series. And they're okay, but their launch it left a little to be desired. Their motherboards, AM5 motherboards, are fairly expensive, and they only work with DDR5 RAM, and that was fairly expensive. And so, you know, it was great if you were the kind of person that if you were going to buy like the 7900X or the 7950X, you're already spending a lot of money because you want the best of the best. Like you're buying the Ryzen 9 or the Core i9. Those types of people are going to spend a lot of money on their motherboard anyways, typically. And, you know, if they want the best of the best, they want the newest thing, they want the DDR5, so they're going to spend more money on the DDR5. But for the lower end 7000 series, the 7600 and 7700, it kind of made a little bit less sense. And a lot of people were saying, you know, now's the time just to get, you know, a 12th gen Intel or a 5000 series AMD. And so the 5000 series AMD is already so much cheaper than the 7000s, and the motherboards are cheaper and the RAM is cheaper, that AMD almost didn't really need to lower the price on the 5000 series. Honestly, it was already on sale. Like the 5800X was, I think, $499 for the longest time. So it had dropped from $620 down to $499. And I think it dropped a little bit more since then. But yeah, just again, this was just like Thanksgiving weekend. They really put them on sale, like even more. And almost to the point where they didn't need to. The 5700X. So my store had 7 5700Xs that they came in on shipment like earlier that night. And then they went on sale at midnight. And by the time I think 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock the next day rolled around, they were all gone. Like we had sold all 7 of them. And with the G series in particular, I find as they start to get EOL, the price actually starts to go up. Try and find a 3400G right now, because remember, they didn't have like the APUs in the 5000 series at launch. There was actually quite a while where the 3200G and the 3400G were basically their latest desktop APUs. And, you know, when they stopped making those, you know, the prices just went up and up and up. Try to find a 3400G now. And so I kind of figure the same thing's going to happen. If they've stopped making some of these 5000 series, and what we're looking at now is just what's left. And, you know, they might have tens and thousands or hundreds of thousands of these chips across all their, you know, warehouses and distributors and everything. I don't know. I'm not saying they're going to dry up like right away, but I'm saying you're not going to see this for $139 ever again. The 5600G, mark my words, you will not see this chip for sale for $139.99 Canadian ever again. It's not going to happen. These are going to start to dry up. The prices are going to start to go up and up and up, and you're never going to see it for that cheap again. Oh, look at that. Quality stuff there, A-Data. That's weird. That is weird. Not to put you on the spot there, A-Data, but what's up with that? That RAM's just been put in there and it's never been touched since. Weird. Well, I'll fix that. I'm sure it's no big deal. I've already upgraded the BIOS on the motherboard. This is a B450 motherboard. And funny thing is, I went to download the BIOS for it, and I thought, oh, I did update the BIOS on this motherboard like since I bought it, and like I guess I have a bad like, I guess like the last couple years have flown by for a lot of people, so like it might feel like it was only like a year ago or 2 years ago that you did something, but then maybe if you think about it, maybe that was actually like 4 years ago. Shit. But yeah, I do remember upgrading the BIOS on this motherboard when I got it, and so I thought, oh, I'll be like at least halfway up the list of the BIOS updates. But no, I was at F4, and they were up to like F60 or F63. So I ended up downloading, I forget it was F60 or F63, but I ended up downloading one of those and trying to flash it, and it kept saying it was a bad BIOS file. I noticed on some of these in the list, so I went back and I looked again at this list, and some of them, like you can see, I think it's like F30 or F40, like they're saying you need to, well, it must have been around F40 or F50. They were saying you needed to have like at least F32, if I remember, before you can like go beyond that. It was saying that like a red, warning on several of those in the list, but as you got up eventually, like where I was F60, F63, they didn't mention that anymore, so you kind of had to scroll down to see that. And I thought, well, that's weird. Like if F50 required F32 to be pre-installed, wouldn't F60? So that's what I did. I downloaded F32, updated the BIOS to F32, and then I was able to update the BIOS to, again, I forget, it was like F60 or F63. So just one small thing to keep in mind is like sometimes you have to have the motherboard BIOS up to a certain date before you can update it beyond that to the next date. So just kind of weird. And, they were mentioning it for a while, then it just seems like they just stopped mentioning it. So sometimes just scroll back and look. But yeah, so the BIOS is up to date now so that it will handle the 5600G. That's a thing, like when I sell motherboards at work, and people think like, oh, that's only an AMD issue or that's only an Intel issue. For example, if you had like a B5, is it B560 that supported like 10th and 11th gen? But if you were putting an 11th gen chip on it, you would need to update the BIOS. It's not just an AMD thing. I think some people think it's just an AMD thing because it's probably more likely with AMD because the AM4 socket's been around for so long. This AM4 socket, this motherboard can support 1000, 2000, 3000, 4000, and 5000 series Ryzen processors. So like there's 5 generations over like 6 years. Well, when did Ryzen come out? Probably about 5 years ago. We got about 5 generations across 5 years worth of different processors that will work on this motherboard. Yeah, of course it's going to need a BIOS update. If your CPU is newer than your motherboard has no way of knowing what that CPU is. That's impossible. The motherboard was made before that CPU was made, right? So this motherboard was probably made back when Ryzen, well, when 400 series chipset, the motherboard was probably made in 2018 or 2019, and then the 5600G came out in what, 2021, I think. I'm just going off the top of my head. The point is, yeah, the CPU is newer than the motherboard. This CPU didn't exist when this motherboard was made, so of course it needs a BIOS update. It's really that simple. If the CPU is newer than the motherboard needs a BIOS update to run that CPU. This has got a 256 gigabyte M.2 NVMe drive for the boot drive, and then it's got a 5 terabyte. So that's a Seagate 5 terabyte hard drive. That's literally just movies. Again, this is a home theater PC, so it's 5 terabytes worth of movies on it. So if the internet's ever down for a day, I've got a well, hell, a lot longer than a day. If the internet ever goes down, I've got a lot of movies on there that I can watch, even if I can't, watch Netflix or Amazon Prime or Disney Plus or any of those types of services. So I just kind of like having that there. And there's, sometimes there's movies that I have on there that aren't on any of the streaming services that I pay for. So don't download movies, kids. Anyways, I'll get that chip swapped. Again, the BIOS is already up to date, so it should be pretty straightforward. I'll probably clean that cooler and apply some new thermal paste. That is a Deep Cool Gamex 300. And so, get that off there. It's a 120 millimeter fan. Although, as you can see, the fan's kind of bigger than the heatsink. Like, the heatsink's maybe 100 millimeters worth of actual size to it. That really doesn't want to come off. I'll do that later off camera. But yeah, it's got this 120 millimeter fan on there and then like 3 copper heat pipes that run down and make direct contact with the CPU. It's a fair upgrade from the cooler that came with. Like there's the stock Wraith or whatever it's called, Wraith Stealth or something like that. Probably basically the same one that comes with the 5600G. And I mean, these are adequate. They will keep the chip cool enough. You don't have to worry about that. But it is kind of loud. That small, I don't know what that is, 80 or 90 millimeter fan, it would spin up to like 3,000 RPM. It would kind of have that high-pitched noise that was kind of annoying. For a home theater PC, I want it to be quiet. So this with this bigger 120 millimeter fan, it's actually quite a bit quieter, and it's cooler. Like I always say with these cheap coolers, it's kind of win-win. Like this is like a $20 cooler, but it's cooler and quieter than the ones that AMD gives you. So like $20, you can upgrade your cooler. So yeah, that's why that's in there. And I think that's it. There's no fan in the front. They just have the 120 millimeter exhaust fan. Again, there's no graphics card in here. A little 2200G. It's not putting out that much heat. It really doesn't need more. In fact, I don't even think this is going to put out a little more heat, but yeah, they're probably both like 65 watts TDP, I would guess. The Zen 3 is going to run hotter just because it's constantly trying to boost up all core clock speeds. So, I mean, Zen 3 in general runs hotter. And Zen 4 runs even hotter still. So that's where we're going with CPUs. They're just running hotter and hotter and hotter every generation. These last few generations, and Intel and AMD. It's not an AMD. Again, I'm not just dissing AMD. That's not an AMD thing. The 12th generation, Intel, the 12th generation, the Core i9 12900K or KS, I think is like 250 watts TDP under full turbo. Like, it's insane. You literally need like a 360 millimeter AIO to keep a Core i9 12900KS cool enough to the point you're actually getting the performance out of it. Because, if you put like a cheap 240 mil on it, it'll probably be okay, but I bet you it's thermal throttling under like heavy all-core loads. And it could be thermal throttling to the point that you're really not getting much speed over like a Core i7 12700K. That's the thing, right? It's like you need to keep it cool enough to get its potential out of it. And if you're going for an i9 over an i7, you need to get that little bit of extra performance out of it to make it worthwhile. And yeah, again, the 12900K or KS, even just the K, the 12900K, it's the hottest running Intel processor probably they've ever made. They're just getting more and more power hungry, and they're pumping out more and more heat. And for a while it was kind of going the other way. They're in such closer competition than they've really ever been, at least since like the Pentium 3 or Pentium 4 era. Like Pentium 3 era, for sure, when you had like the first original Athlon and the T-Bird, comparing up to the Pentium 3, and they were like so close, right? Well, they haven't been that close for a long time, and now they are again. But it's making them both like super, super competitive, which maybe is a good thing. I mean, obviously CPUs now, the 12th gen Intel and 7000 series Ryzen, they're just really, really fast, but they're faster than most people need. And, it's like, at what cost? And I don't know, graphics cards seem to be going the same way so far with the 40 series. Not as bad as some of the initial rumors with the 40 series. Oh my God, the 4090 is gonna use like 600 watts. No, it's not that bad. But they're at a point where they're using more and more power. And again, actually, AMD, props to AMD with Radeon, RDNA 2, the 7000 series really doesn't get enough love. It doesn't get the attention it deserves, although it's starting to now. Because, the bang for the buck and the performance per watt on the 7000 series is arguably even better than the 30 series from NVIDIA, if you just look at performance per watt. But like I've said before, NVIDIA has way better their ray tracing performance obviously is way better, and their all their like DLSS and all that stuff is just better. So I get why people buy NVIDIA, and I sell 80% NVIDIA over Radeon. But like, if you don't care about ray tracing, you don't care about DLSS, the FRS 2.0 or whatever it is getting pretty good. So if you don't really care about ray tracing, and you're playing mostly games that aren't ray traced, or don't have ray tracing, or you don't think it's worth it, the 7000 series Radeon, bang for the buck, it just kills the 30 series NVIDIA. So yeah, I don't know. Well, holy shit, I got way off topic there. All that because of this. $139 is, again, that's like chump change. That was like the glory days of like the 2200G, or maybe the 3200G at one point, maybe was that cheap. But yeah, I don't need it, but I got it anyways. And we'll have to fix this and clean this thing out, but I'll get it all back together and it'll be running better than it needs to be for what I need. Anyways, I guess that's it. You know what? I was gonna say, if you have been thinking about upgrading your PC, maybe now's the time to do it. I don't know if these are still on sale. That might have only been Thanksgiving. But if you can get like a 5800X for like $299 Canadian, I don't know what that would be, $240, $250 tops. Like if you can get a 5800X for $250 US, like it might be worth considering if you're on a first or second gen Ryzen, or a 6th, 7th, 8th gen Intel, and you've been kind of thinking, is it the time? Yeah. Now is the time, right now, if you can get a 5700X for under $200, or like a 5800X for like $250 US, do it. Now is the time for sure, because they're going to be gone soon, and then you're just going to be stuck with like ones on Amazon or eBay that are heavily marked up, or like the 7000 series Ryzen, which is very expensive. And I don't know about 13th gen Intel. It's maybe going to be a little bit cheaper, which is a whole thing, a whole other video on its own. It's just the fact that sometimes Intel has been the cheaper option, which is weird. I mean, I remember 11th gen at one point, or even 10th gen. I remember when you could get a 10th gen i9 cheaper than like a 3800X or a 3900X. I forget exactly what it was, but the i9 was 10 core. And yeah, it would have been the 3800X was the 8 core. I think the i9 was cheaper at one point, which is crazy. Intel has been very aggressive with their pricing. They seem to be able to make the chips cheaper than AMD, which I guess makes sense because Intel actually makes the chips themselves. They fab the chips themselves, whereas AMD has, is it TMSS or whoever's fabbing them now? See, I don't even know. I think it's still TMSS. Anyways, the point is AMD doesn't fab their own chips. They got to pay someone else to make them, whereas Intel is making their own chips in their own factories. So I guess that makes sense. I never really thought of it that way, but it's crazy that for a while, and I think it's still true. It's still true. It was still true to some extent during the 12th gen, the 5000 series AMD versus the 12th gen. Is like sometimes the Intels, when they were on sale, they were the better bang for the buck, which is just mind blowing. So yeah, props to Intel for their pricing, and props to AMD for keeping the performance side. You know, they've kept the competition up in the performance side, and Intel's kind of been at least trying to keep the prices down. So, you know, they're both doing good, I think. Um, it would be nice to see AMD lowering their prices, not counting the current sale, because again, that's just kind of like a fluke, a really damn good fluke, but it's just kind of a fluke. The 7000 series is expensive, and I know they're expensive for AMD to make, or I should say get made for them. So yeah, that's another, again, just the modern processors are pretty expensive compared to what they used to be, but so is GPUs, I guess. Argument would be so is everything, to a degree. But anyways, I guess that's it. Again, didn't need it, but super good sale. And I really just wanted to say, if you're on the fence, if you've been thinking about doing an upgrade lately, now's the time to do it. You know, if you can get a 12th gen Intel on, or even an 11th gen, old stock, really good sale. But you know what? These are really hard to beat right now. Again, a 5700X for under $200 Canadian is like literally insane. Just insane. And again, we sold like all of them in the country in a day, which is just insane. So, yeah. Anyways, that's it. See you guys later.